everyone. I am Joe, and this is an episode of Congruent Leadership. I'm here with a few of my friends, and we'll all introduce themselves in a bit. I'll start us off. So I'm Joe, and I'm in South Africa currently. I work with organizations and with leaders to help them improve their processes and their ways of doing things. And I'm going to hand over to Esther. Esther.
Hi, I'm Esther Derby. I live in lovely, lively Duluth, Minnesota, which is at the tip of Lake Superior. It's very different from South Africa, but I do similar work. I work with leaders and managers in primarily software organizations to help them create environments where people can thrive and create great products and services. And I'll pass it off to Marcus.
Thanks, Esther. I'm Marcus Blankenship. I live in the desert of Oregon, probably very different from where other places, well, maybe not. I think I want to be like Joe and Esther when I grow up, but mostly I try and help people and individuals be better leaders and better managers and build places where their teams can thrive. And again, primarily in the software domain. Don.
So, hi, I'm Don Gray. I work with executives and managers building coherent organizational structure, processes, policies, and goals where teams can thrive. I live in the western part of North Carolina, not far from the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. And today we're going to discuss debugging performance problems. And the first question I have is, when you say performance problem, what do you mean when you say performance problem?
It's a great question.
It is a great question, and it feels like it's layered, right? I think sometimes, depending on where you're sitting in the organization, a performance problem might look very different. If you're a leader of a team or a group of people, then maybe it's an individual thing. And if you're a senior executive, maybe it's your whole organization or your whole division or your whole department.
Well, I noticed when you talked about if you were at a team level, it's an individual issue. And I think it's very easy to focus on individual performance issues because we've been taught to focus on individual performance. And it's easy to see, but systems and processes are hard to see, right? And very often performance problems are because of some problem in the process or some problem in the the way the team has been designed or formed, or they don't know what they're supposed to do. There can be all sorts of reasons that may show up in individual behavior, but people are responding to the environment. They're responding to the constraints that they've been given.
Yeah, I think if there were an HR rep here, they probably would say that a performance problem with an individual is them not meeting the requirements of the job description, as though it were simply a checklist of things. And as long as they did all those things and the person was meeting, was a fine performer or a successful performer. And I find that that thinking is almost never very useful because we don't my guess, and I'd love to hear from others here if we want to talk about it. My sense is that managers become aware of performance problems almost at their gut before their brain. There is some sense they get rather than a clear set of facts. I could be wrong. There's all kinds of ways to spot these things. But oftentimes I speak with managers who just have a sense, if you were to ask them of who are the good performers and the poor performers, they would say they just have a gut sense about it. So I think sometimes coming to facts can be difficult.
Yeah. And that gut sense is often wrong.
Absolutely.
The gut sense is often who is most like me or who does things I would do them. Versus anything that can be called out in a fact-based way. But I think the unit of analysis at that level needs to be the team, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
One of the things I've been thinking about quite a lot is that uh, it's impossible for humans to always be at 150%. We're going to have our ups and downs and good days and bad days and all of those things. And so if we rather think about it and focus on performance at a team level, we're probably far more likely to create environments where success is more consistent, at least
Yeah.
over time. Whereas when we're focusing at an individual level, any number of things could happen. I've been on teams where, some people had like really crazy things going on for a really long time. And so they just really weren't able to be at their best and they were contributing whatever they could. But because we had quite a lot of resilience in the team, it didn't really matter that they weren't, at the 150%. So we could just keep operating, which I think was really cool. Yeah, so
Did
I
I
think
hear
so.
you say 150%?
Yeah, I only say 150% because it feels like many organizations, there's an expectation that people will be at
Well,
150%.
it's not even possible. I mean, what does being
Uh,
operating or performing at 100% even mean? Right.
It's meaningless.
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah. I mean, the only way that I have figured out to think about that is if you have a quota and are people meet quota or not, or they
Mm.
exceed quota. And, that's not the kind of work, pump out
No.
the codes or X lines of code, functions. That's meaningless.
It is.
And how would you measure software? Your quota is 10,000 lines of code a day.
Of
Uh,
crap code or working
Mm.
code or
Yeah.
yeah,
Works on my machine code or
AI
put into
makes it
production
easier.
code or
yeah.
breaks everything in
AI
production
makes it much
code.
easier to have bloated code. That is true.
Uh,
Yeah, but I
mm,
think there is an expectation that people will, you know, meet some arbitrary and
mm,
unmeasurable bar,
mm,
and that's as useless as the kind of checkbox about are you meeting all the things in your job description, because most job descriptions don't really closely match the work that happens.
mm,
It's far more fluid, right? I mean, I think about job descriptions as as if they're written for parts. This is your part, and if you do your job and he does his job,
mm.
everything will work. But there's all the stuff that happens in between, and the collaboration and the co-thinking and the co-creation, and the dynamics of individuals and teams, and that doesn't show up in job descriptions.
Yeah, exactly. And when we create that's when I often see things go wrong, is when we create very, very rigid job descriptions as well. The number of workshops that I've run where people are just trying to figure out, okay, who in this role needs to do these things, and let's kind of figure out together what does the organization need from us, who's the best person for this, who, like from a role perspective or from an individual perspective, what are the things we need to do together, where are we stomping on each other's toes. Yeah, and none of those ever showed up in a job description. Mostly they were as a product of of discovery, and emergence in an environment that was busy changing and needed to know how to change itself to keep up, I guess. Yeah.
So how do we go about debugging something like
Mm,
performance? We've talked about, the unit of measurement should be the team. The
mm,
system impacts the value that the individuals have or can provide. One of
mm,
Esther's favorite equations is Kurt Lewin's behavior is a function of the person and their environment. As
mm.
managers, coaches, consultants, how do we go about working with this? Debugging.
Don, I think you did
Again
a
with
nice job of debugging our session, getting us back on track there,
mm,
by reminding us of the goal. I don't know whether that's an intervention that is a nudge, but that is something I've seen work with teams, is to help remind them of the goal of what they're doing and what they're working on and the constraints. Uh, thank you for nudging us and hopefully improving our performance in real time.
Yeah,
Mm,
I think that's certainly a big element of it. I mean, I go back to Hackman and his research
mm,
teams. He researched teams of all sorts for many decades, and having being a real team so that you are mutually accountable to each other, and you have kind of a known membership, so it's not people are changing every day or so. And I have seen teams where the membership changes every day. You have a clear and compelling goal. You have information about the work and how it fits into the bigger context. You have the material you need to do, and you have a connection to the organization. So there's somebody who really cares about your work. And so that's where I start, right? Do they have a clear goal? Is it really a team? Are there skills? Are there interdependent work and complementary skills to do that work? So that's where I start. And very often, like you say, just clarifying the goal makes things work a lot better. It gets rid of all sorts of irrelevant conflict.
mm. Definitely. And I think I think that's a big one that I've seen. So many teams flounder with because they just don't know where they're supposed to be going. Organizations, I think, like sometimes we think we've got a delivery problem, but actually it's really a prioritization problem. What's the most important thing that needs to be the focus of any group's attention, I think, is a very, very important part of making sure people are going in the right direction. And then the other thing that you mentioned that I also notice quite often is this element of the interconnectedness. There's often a lot of interconnectedness between groups and teams. And so as managers and leaders, I think helping to untangle some of that interconnectedness and think about like where are the cues in our system, and are the decisions that we're making it worse or making it better, is a good principle to play with sometimes. Like, okay, cool, we're doing this new thing. Are we making it worse? Or are we making it better? And understanding how our work flows is sometimes the starting point there, because if we don't know what that really looks like as opposed to what we think it looks like, then I think sometimes we make assumptions and we make decisions based on those assumptions.
So what you're
Yeah.
pointing to here is that the team is not producing the desired outcomes, and the problem isn't of the team at all. It's the way the team
More
was
systemic.
formed, or it's a systemic thing about the way the work flows into the team and among other teams. And those are not individual performance problems at the team level. You could on some level say that's a performance problem with the manager, who is not creating the environment for the team, right? And giving the team what they need to be successful. And most managers I have met have not been taught to think about things in that way. They've been taught to focus on individual performance. So on one level, you can't fault them for making that mistake, because it's not what they've been taught or reinforced to look at.
Yeah, that's true. And I think the other thing is that sometimes it's hidden. It's so very hidden. It's so difficult. So a manager's trying to optimize an area or a team or make things better, but that manager is part of a bigger system with 5 other managers, and they're all trying to optimize their teams and make things better for their teams. And then, there's not always somebody bringing them all together and saying, okay, well, we're all actually part of this bigger system. We're all going in the same direction. How do we now design for all of us so that we're designing at the right layers as well? We
So
went from individual, now we're at a bigger group. Sorry.
That's a lateral linking problem, right? Where the managers are looking down at their teams and looking up at their managers, but they aren't looking across at the system. So then you need lateral linking so that people understand more about how things fit together. Again, it's a context problem. It's always context.
It's
It's
always
true.
context. And as I think back to where we started talking about individuals, different layers of the organization and systems. I'm reminded of what Deming said. He's quoted as saying, "A bad system will always defeat a good person."
Mm,
He also said that when you have performance problems, he called it a high variance, that the system accounted for 94% of that variance and the individual would count for about 6%.
Yeah. Of
huh.
course, he's looking at a different type of system than the systems we typically work in.
And maybe we can pick up there next time. So what we've talked about today are individuals, teams, and systems. And the advantage of debugging at the system level is it improves the system for everyone. There's the old saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. Um, so as you start to debug performance problems, it's best to look at the system first before you start blaming an individual or pointing the finger of blame at someone.
Mm,
Yeah, and occasionally there are people who are not willing or able for whatever reason to do their job, and then you have to handle that as a manager or leader, but that's a completely different problem.
Yep.
mm,
In this video, we talked about some of the places to look when you think there's a performance problem before you pin it on an individual. In subsequent videos, we're going to talk more about what to do if you think there's a problem at the team level, how can you intervene there? Or if you think the problem might be at the organizational level, what are the things you can do there? And of course, we'll talk about what to do if it is actually an individual performance problem. So stay tuned.